Welcome to the Behind Story, where the wildest Karen encounters come to life. Get ready for jaw-dropping, hilarious, and downright unbelievable moments as Karens take entitlement to the next level. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a crazy story. Let's jump right in. I knew she was going to be a problem the moment she moved in. Some people just don't belong in the countryside, and this woman, let's call her Karen, was one of them. She arrived in a gleaming white SUV, the kind that never sees a speck of dirt, the kind that screams, "I belong in a gated community with a Starbucks around the corner, not next to a farm." The moving truck followed, loaded with pretentious furniture and tasteless lawn ornaments, and I watched from my porch as a parade of clueless movers struggled to place them in her pristine new home. A home, mind you, that sat directly next to my family's farm, a farm that has been in my family for generations. At first, I held on to a small sliver of hope. Maybe she'd get used to the smell of fresh manure in the morning. Maybe she'd grow fond of the rhythmic sound of mooing at dusk. Maybe, just maybe, she'd mind her own damn business. But I should have known better. Hope is for fools, and I was about to be introduced to an entirely new level of entitled lunacy. It started small, almost laughable. One afternoon, while I was repairing the fence that bordered our properties, she stormed over, her arms crossed so tightly, I thought she might snap in half. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do they have to be so loud?" I looked up, confused. "They?" "The cows," she spat, as if the word itself was offensive. "They make so much noise. It's disturbing." I wiped the sweat from my forehead and straightened up. "Ma'am, this is a farm. That's what cows do." She wrinkled her nose like I had just waved a pile of manure under it. "Well, I didn't expect it to be this bad. I can hear them all night. It's incredibly disruptive." I blinked. Disruptive? My cows? The same cows that had lived peacefully on this land, long before her manicured nails ever pointed a judgmental finger at them. Before I could respond, she threw up her hands dramatically. I thought living near nature would be charming, but this is unbearable. Can't you do something? I let out a short, humorless laugh. "What exactly do you want me to do? Tell them to whisper?" She huffed, clearly unimpressed by my sarcasm. "I just think it's inconsiderate. People pay a lot to live in a nice neighborhood, and no one wants to hear farm animals at all hours." I narrowed my eyes. "This isn't a neighborhood. It's a farm. My farm." She opened her mouth, probably to spew another round of nonsense, but I turned back to my fence, dismissing her like the ridiculous pest she was. I figured that was the end of it. Maybe she just needed to vent, and I had given her that chance. But no, 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 no. That was just the beginning. The next week, she left a note in my mailbox, a formal complaint about my cows. Written in flowery, passive-aggressive language, it claimed that their unnecessary presence was negatively impacting the community's ambiance. Community? What community? It was my land, my pasture, my animals. There were maybe a handful of houses nearby, but this wasn't some HOA-ruled suburb where bored housewives could dictate the color of your mailbox. I crumpled the note and threw it straight into the compost bin. Then came the comments about the smell. The scent of fresh-cut hay mixed with manure, the kind of smell that meant life and labor and good, honest work. To me, it was the smell of home. To her, it was apparently an unforgivable offense. One morning, she stormed over again, this time waving a can of air freshener like some kind of lunatic exorcist. "I can't even open my windows," she shrieked. "It's disgusting. It's unhealthy. There has to be some kind of law against this." I stared at her, half expecting her to start spraying it at my barn. "It's a farm, lady." Her eyes flashed with fury. "You should do something about it." I leaned on my shovel, fighting the urge to laugh in her face. "You mean like, move my entire farm somewhere else?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll be speaking to the homeowners association about this." I nearly choked on my own spit. The HOA? I repeated, barely holding in my laughter. Lady, I'm not part of the HOA. They don't control my land. She blinked, stunned into silence for a whole 2 seconds. Well, they should. I watched as she spun on her heel and stomped away, back to her pristine house with its chemically treated lawn and its decorative live, laugh, love sign hanging mockingly in the window. I had a sinking feeling that this was far from over. And I was right. Oh, I was so right. The letter arrived on a Thursday. I had just finished feeding the cows, enjoying a rare moment of peace, when I spotted the official-looking envelope sitting in my mailbox. Thick, cream-colored paper with a pretentious HOA logo embossed on the top corner. My stomach twisted as I ripped it open, already bracing myself for whatever entitled nonsense was inside. And sure enough, it was exactly what I expected. Dear property owner, it has come to our attention that your livestock is negatively impacting the aesthetics and harmony of the community. Numerous complaints have been filed regarding excessive noise, unpleasant odors, and unsightly farm animals being visible from neighboring properties. As such, the Homeowners Association formally requests that you take immediate action to address these issues. The following measures are strongly advised. Reduce the number of livestock on your property to maintain a more agreeable living environment. Construct a visual barrier to prevent community members from being subjected to the sight of livestock. Take appropriate measures to mitigate any offensive odors that may be affecting nearby homes. Failure to comply with these recommendations may result in further action. I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then, I did the only thing a sane person could do. I burst out laughing, a deep, incredulous laugh that echoed over my fields, causing a few of my cows to pause their grazing and stare at me in confusion. This had Karen's entitled fingerprints all over it. First off, my farm wasn't part of any HOA. It never had been. The HOA only governed the newer, overpriced cookie-cutter houses that had been plopped down a few years ago. My land had been here for generations, long before any of those houses existed. The idea that a group of suburbanites thought they could waltz in and dictate what I did on my own damn property was as ridiculous as it was infuriating. I stormed into my house, grabbed my phone, and dialed the number listed at the bottom of the letter. It rang a few times before a perky, professionally fake voice answered. This is Cynthia from the Homeowners Association. How may I assist you? Yeah, Cynthia, I said, my voice dripping with barely restrained irritation. I just got a letter from you people demanding that I glanced at the paper again, reading the most absurd line out loud. Mitigate the offensive odors coming from my cows? What exactly do you suggest I do? Install air fresheners on their backs? A nervous little chuckle. Sir, we've received multiple complaints from residents. You mean one resident? I cut in. And let me guess she drives a white SUV, looks like she's never worked a day in her life, and has the temperament of a spoiled Pomeranian. A pause. A telltale hesitation before she cleared her throat. We can't disclose the names of those who filed complaints. Oh, come on. We both know it's her. I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of my kitchen counter to keep myself from punching a hole through the drywall. Listen, lady, my farm isn't part of your HOA, so your rules don't apply to me. I don't care how many strongly worded letters you send, I'm not getting rid of my cows. Another pause. Then, the sickly sweet condescension slid into her tone like oil on water. Well, sir, we do hope you reconsider. The association has the best interests of the community at heart. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought I might crack a molar. My farm isn't your community. Before she could spew another line of bureaucratic nonsense, I hung up. For a few days, I thought that would be the end of it. Surely, once Karen realized the HOA had no authority over my land, she'd give up and move on to some other petty crusade, maybe start a campaign against squirrels for trespassing into her yard. I was wrong. The next week, another letter arrived, The same ridiculous complaints, only this time with a more aggressive tone. Words like compliance mandatory action and property devaluation were thrown around as if any of that meant a damn thing to me. Then, just to make things even more absurd, they included a list of demands. I stared at the paper in disbelief. This was next level insanity. Reduce the number of cows on your property to no more than 5. Build a fence no less than 6 feet tall to block the view of said livestock. Take immediate steps to neutralize any animal odors that may travel beyond your property line. And the best one of all, ensure that livestock noises do not exceed acceptable decibel levels. I swear I nearly choked on my own rage. Were they suggesting I shush my cows? That was it. No more ignoring it. No more hoping it would go away. If this entitled lunatic wanted a war, she had just declared one. I shoved the letter into my pocket, grabbed my truck keys, and drove straight to the HOA office. I didn't bother making an appointment. I marched in, slammed the letter down on the desk, and fixed Cynthia with a glare so intense it could have curdled milk. "This doesn't apply to me," I said coldly. "My land is not under HOA jurisdiction. You send me one more letter, and I'll be seeing you in court." Cynthia looked like she wanted to disappear under the desk, but before she could stammer out some half-hearted response, I heard a familiar screech from across the room. "Karen!" She stood there, seething, hands on her hips, eyes wild with entitlement. "You're ruining this community," she shrieked. "You can't just ignore the welfare of your neighbors." I crossed my arms. "Yes, I can. My farm was here before any of you. If you don't like it, the road out of town is right behind you." Her face turned a deep shade of red. She opened her mouth, probably to unleash another tirade, but this time, I turned my back on her. I wasn't playing her game, but something told me she wasn't done playing hers. I should have known that shutting her down at the HOA office wouldn't be the end of it. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. No, she was the kind of entitled lunatic who saw a boundary and decided it was her personal mission to bulldoze right through it. 2 days after I confronted her at the HOA, the real war began. It started with the signs. I woke up early, as I always did, ready to tend to my cattle. The air was crisp, the sky tinged with the soft hues of dawn, but as I walked toward the pasture, coffee in hand, something immediately felt off. The cows were restless, huddled away from the fence line, their large eyes darting around nervously. That wasn't normal. My cows weren't skittish animals. Then I saw it, a row of signs, freshly staked into the ground along the fence bordering Karen's property. Polluted area, health risk, unsanitary conditions, keep away danger, contaminated land. I nearly spit out my coffee. Was this woman serious? I stormed over, ripped one of the signs out of the ground, and examined it. Professionally printed. Thick, durable material. Not some half-assed, homemade protest, but something she had spent real money on. I clenched my jaw. Fine, 2 could play at that game. I yanked out every last sign, snapped them in half, and tossed them in the back of my truck. Then, just for good measure, I walked right up to her door and rang the bell. She opened it with a self-satisfied smirk, arms crossed. "Oh, you got my message. What the hell is this?" I snapped, holding up the broken remains of one of her ridiculous signs. "A warning to the community," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "People need to know about the unsanitary conditions you're exposing us to." I let out a dry laugh. "You mean the farm that's been here longer than your entire neighborhood?" She huffed. "That's irrelevant. You're a health hazard, and I have every right to warn people." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a dangerous calm. "Listen to me, lady. You are trespassing on my land by putting these signs up. You do it again, and I'll have the sheriff out here so fast, your hair dye won't have time to dry." She scoffed, unfazed. "Oh, please." I spoke to a lawyer. "As long as the signs are on my property, there's nothing you can do." I narrowed my eyes. You'd better hope that's true. And with that, I turned and walked away, because at that moment, I knew she was waiting for me to explode. She wanted me to yell, to make a scene, so she could paint herself as the poor, victimized homeowner being harassed by an aggressive farmer. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. But oh, I was far from done. The next morning, my phone buzzed before the sun was even up. It was my brother. You need to check your security footage. Now, a cold chill ran down my spine. I rushed to my computer and pulled up the camera feed from the pasture. The footage loaded, grainy in the low light, but clear enough to see a figure near the fence line. A very familiar figure, Karen, holding a hose. At first, I thought she was just watering the grass like a deranged idiot. But then I noticed how she was aiming the water, deliberately soaking the ground at the fence posts. My stomach twisted. She was trying to weaken the soil. She was trying to make the fence fall. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't just an annoying HOA battle anymore. This was full-blown sabotage. I stormed outside, checking the damage. Sure enough, the soil was muddy and loose, the wooden posts tilting slightly in places. Not enough to collapse right away. But if she kept this up, one good storm and I'd have cattle wandering all over the damn neighborhood. I took photos, every angle, every soaked patch of earth. Then I saved the security footage to a flash drive. I wasn't going to her door this time. No. I was going straight to the police. The officer at the station barely held back a smirk as he watched the footage. This woman really thought she could get away with this? He muttered, shaking his head. That's criminal mischief if I've ever seen it. I nodded. I want to press charges. And just like that, the game changed. Later that day, Karen got a visit from the sheriff's department. I didn't go over, but I watched from my porch as she answered the door, all fake sweetness and wide-eyed innocence. The moment they handed her the official warning notice, her expression twisted into something ugly. I saw her argue, saw her flail her arms dramatically, saw her point at my farm as if she could somehow shift the blame onto me. But the officers weren't having it. When they left, she stood frozen on her porch, clutching the paper in her shaking hands. Then, slowly, she turned her head and locked eyes with me. I took a long, deliberate sip of my coffee. She slammed her door so hard a decorative wreath fell off. For the next 2 days, she was quiet. No letters, no signs, no Karen. I almost let myself believe she'd finally learned her lesson. Then, on the third night, I heard the cows again, panicked, distressed noises. And when I ran outside with my flashlight, I saw something that made my blood boil. A strange white powder scattered across the grass inside the pasture. And standing just beyond the fence, slipping back into the darkness of her yard, was Karen. She wasn't just trying to sabotage my farm anymore. She was trying to kill my cattle. My blood turned to ice. The pale, powdery substance littered the grass like a death sentence. It clung to the damp earth in unsettling patches, stark white against the dark soil. My cows, the same ones that had been peacefully grazing here for years, now stood in a tight huddle, their usual calm shattered. Some snorted anxiously, pawing at the ground, their instincts screaming at them that something was wrong. I didn't need a lab test to tell me what I was looking at. Poison. Every muscle in my body locked up as my mind raced through the possibilities. Rat poison, industrial cleaner, some concoction. Karen had Googled at 2 a.m. on her overpriced laptop while sipping organic tea and plotting the destruction of my livelihood. I clenched my fists, sucking in a slow, controlled breath, forcing my rage down. Think, act, move. I grabbed my phone and called the vet first. I need you out here. Now. Someone just tried to poison my cows. Dr. Hensley, who'd been treating my herd for years, didn't ask any questions. On my way. Keep them away from it. Don't let them eat anything. I didn't need to be told twice. I whistled sharply, signaling my cattle, and began ushering them toward the barn. Even the most stubborn ones obeyed without hesitation, as if they understood the danger in the air. It was only when I had them locked safely inside that I let myself turn back toward the scene of the crime. And then I saw her, Karen, standing just beyond the fence, half hidden in the shadows of her pristine backyard. I don't know if she thought I wouldn't notice her. Maybe she assumed I was too distracted with saving my animals. Maybe she thought I'd be too scared to confront her. If so, she had gravely underestimated me. I strode toward the fence, my boots crushing the poisoned grass beneath me. My pulse hammered in my ears, every step sharpening my focus, channeling my fury into something cold and unshakable. She was trying to slip away when I called out, "Karen." She froze, caught like a deer in headlights. I pointed at the white powder. "Want to explain this?" She turned slowly, plastering on that sickeningly fake smile of hers. "I don't know what you're talking about." I laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "Oh, come on. You really expect me to believe that? You've been trying to get rid of my farm since the day you moved in. You tried the HOA, you tried the signs, you even tried to sabotage my fence. And now this?" I gestured at the poisoned ground. "This is attempted animal cruelty, Karen. A felony." Her smirk faltered for a split second before she recovered. "That's ridiculous. I was just sanitizing the area." She lifted her chin, as if that ridiculous excuse was supposed to hold weight. "Do you have any idea how many bacteria come from farm animals?" I was just protecting the neighborhood. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "By poisoning innocent animals." "Oh, please." She scoffed. "They wouldn't have even eaten it. Besides, if your cows were gone, maybe this property wouldn't be such an eyesore. You'd thank me eventually." There it was, the confession. The sheer, unhinged entitlement of a woman who thought she could erase my family's legacy just because she didn't like the way it looked next to her designer patio furniture. And she had no idea she had just sealed her own fate. I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. The screen was still recording. Karen's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. You can't use that." "I didn't mean." I turned the phone screen toward her, letting her see the little red recording symbol flashing in the corner. "Oh, but I can. And I will." Her face twisted in rage, then desperation. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled coldly. "Try me." She stood there, shaking, torn between lashing out and running. And in that moment, I knew she was truly afraid, not of me, but of the consequences, the reality crashing down on her entitled little world. Blue and red lights flickered against the trees as the sound of sirens cut through the night. The vet wasn't the only one I had called. The sheriff's car pulled up along the gravel road, headlights flooding the poisoned pasture. Two officers stepped out, their hands resting on their belts as they took in the scene. Karen whipped around to face them, her face contorted in righteous indignation. "Oh, thank God. Officer, this man is harassing me." "He's, ma'am." The officer cut her off, his tone all business. "We've received a report of possible animal cruelty and trespassing. We're going to need to ask you a few questions." Her mouth flapped open and shut like a fish gasping for air. "Animal cruelty? I would never." "This is all a misunderstanding." The officer turned to me. "You said you have evidence?" I held up my phone. "Everything's on here. Video, audio, plus my security footage from last night when she tried to sabotage my fence." Karen went pale. "That's illegal. You can't record me." The officer didn't even blink. "That's for the judge to decide." Karen's hands balled into fists, her entire body trembling with rage. "You're making a huge mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with. My husband is an attorney, and I will sue you into the ground for this." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, then looked back at her with complete disinterest. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." Karen's jaw dropped. "What?" You're under arrest for criminal mischief and attempted animal cruelty. You have the right to remain silent. You can't do this." She shrieked as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "I was just trying to make the neighborhood better. This isn't fair." But no one was listening to her anymore. I watched in silence as they led her toward the patrol car, her screams echoing into the night. She had spent so much time trying to force me out, trying to make me disappear, and now she was the one being taken away. The next morning, the whole town knew. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, the woman who thought she could bend reality to her will, was sitting in a jail cell. And the best part? Everyone knew exactly why. It started with the sheriff's department, officially charging her with criminal mischief, trespassing, and attempted animal cruelty. The moment that arrest report became public, the gossip spread like wildfire. By noon, every coffee shop, grocery store, and Facebook group in town was buzzing about the woman who tried to poison a farmer's cows because she didn't like the smell of country living. But Karen? Oh, she wasn't going down without a fight. She posted bail within hours, probably called in every favor she had, cried to whoever still gave a damn about her, and slithered her way back home. I half expected her to lay low, maybe try to weasel her way out of the whole mess quietly. Nope. The very first thing she did, after getting out of jail, she called a meeting with the HOA. And by meeting, I mean she gathered whatever bootlickers she had left and tried to turn the entire neighborhood against me. I only found out because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, missed calls, screenshots of the absolute nonsense she was spewing online. Apparently, Karen was playing the victim. "The farmer next door is dangerous. He set me up. This is a smear campaign against me and the HOA. I was simply trying to clean up our neighborhood, and now I am the villain?" The sheer audacity of this woman. But here's the thing about living in a small town. People talk, and Karen had burned too many bridges, because while she was busy crying about her suffering, my security footage was making the rounds. People had seen the video. They heard her own voice admitting to trying to get rid of my cows. They saw her sneaking onto my land, dumping poison onto the pasture like some unhinged cartoon villain. By the time she tried to turn the HOA against me, the HOA was already turning against her. I showed up to their little emergency meeting, purely for the spectacle, didn't say a word, just leaned against my truck, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. Karen stood at the front of a small gathering of homeowners, face red with frustration, her perfectly styled hair now slightly frazzled from the stress of public humiliation. "We cannot allow criminals in this neighborhood," she was shouting, pointing wildly in my direction. "That man is a menace, Karen. Sit down." Someone interrupted. Susan, one of the older residents, who had always been polite to me whenever I ran into her at the feed store. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Excuse me?" Susan folded her arms. "We saw the footage. You poisoned his land. You tried to sabotage his fence. And now you're standing here acting like you're the victim?" She scoffed. "Enough is enough." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's face twisted into something desperate, something unhinged. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I was protecting our neighborhood." "I was. You were committing a felony," another voice cut in. Steve, one of the HOA's higher-ups, stepping forward with a weary sigh. "Karen, the board had a meeting this morning. We voted." Karen stiffened. "Voted on what?" he exhaled. "You're out." Silence. Pure, golden silence. For the first time since she moved in, Karen had nothing to say. "You're removing me?" She finally croaked. "Me?" Steve nodded. "You embarrassed the HOA. You put this entire neighborhood at risk. Hell, we're lucky we aren't getting sued because of you. You're no longer a member of the board. Effective immediately." It was beautiful. like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Karen's entire body trembled with rage. She turned to the crowd, desperate. "You can't let them do this. I made this neighborhood." No one spoke. Then someone, God bless them, started clapping. A slow, deliberate clap. And then another. And then another. I didn't even have to say a word. Karen turned back toward me, her face twisted with absolute hatred. "You think this is funny?" she snarled. I smiled. "No, Karen. I think it's justice." She let out a guttural sound of frustration, then stormed off, shoving past people like a child throwing a tantrum. I don't know where she went, and honestly, I didn't care. Because from that day forward, she was powerless. The HOA dissolved within the month. Turns out, once people started digging, they found all sorts of shady nonsense, bogus fines, missing funds, Karen's petty vendettas disguised as rules. No one wanted to be part of it anymore. As for me, my farm stayed exactly where it was. My cows continued to graze, moo, and exist just to spite her. And Karen? Well, let's just say the for sale sign in front of her house was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The fall of Karen was just the beginning. The real spectacle was watching the entire HOA crumble like a termite-infested shack in a hurricane. It started within days of her removal. At first, the HOA board tried to pretend everything was business as usual, but something had shifted. People weren't just whispering about Karen anymore, they were digging. It turned out, once you pull one rotten brick, the whole damn wall starts to collapse. Residents started asking questions. Where exactly were all those HOA fees going? Why were fines being issued for ridiculous infractions like one woman getting fined because her front door was the wrong shade of beige? Where was the money from the Community Beautification Fund that Karen and her little minions kept referencing in their newsletters? One brave soul finally did what no one had ever done before, demanded a full financial audit. And that's when the real dumpster fire ignited. The HOA had been bleeding residents dry. Mysterious fees, required donations, absurd fines, all of it unaccounted for. And who had been overseeing all this financial nonsense? That's right, Karen. The audit uncovered thousands of dollars in unexplained expenses. A few transactions stood out like a hefty charge, labeled landscaping improvements, that mysteriously matched the cost of the brand new patio furniture on Karen's deck, or the HOA-funded community dinner that had only included Karen and a few of her friends at an expensive steakhouse. The more they dug, the worse it got. A week after Karen's arrest, the neighborhood meeting was packed. Not just the usual handful of HOA loyalists, everyone showed up, and they were pissed. Steve, the poor guy who had taken over after Karen was booted, stood at the front, sweating bullets, as he tried to explain away the financial disaster. We understand that mistakes were made," he stammered, "but we can fix this if we work together." "No," someone interrupted. "Susan, again, God bless that woman. We're not fixing anything. We're shutting it down." A ripple of murmurs, then cheering. Loud, unapologetic cheering. Steve paled. But the HOA is necessary for maintaining order. The only thing it maintained was Karen's bank account, someone shouted. And just like that, the vote was cast. The HOA was officially dissolved. I didn't even need to vote. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching it all burn. By the time the meeting ended, the neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. People were already talking about repainting their houses, whatever damn color they wanted, putting up fences without needing approval, and best of all, never paying another dime to a pointless, corrupt HOA ever again. As for me, I went home, tossed a fresh bale of hay to my cows, and enjoyed the sound of absolute, unfiltered freedom. The farm was staying, the HOA was dead, and Karen, she was just a bad memory,